Welcome to the Half Yard Line. I'm Tim.
I am Luke.
And Luke, we have completed another week of NFL football. 2 weeks since we have spoken with dear listener.
Yeah, an enforced bye week due to my international travel back to the UK, which is not particularly well time zone orientated in order to record or perform podcast duties. So apologies for the unexpected bye. It was all my fault. Tim is a stalwart and I am a sucker, if you want to phrase it that way. But yeah, the bye week, Tim, obviously because we were also so tense and at each other's throats about the Steelers-Titans game last Thursday.
Absolutely. Barely still friends.
Yeah, so we are not going to talk about that on today's pod. Unfortunately, if you were tuning in for that particular battle between me and Tim, you're not going to get it.
We did win the game.
The Steelers did win the game.
But you found your Hall of Fame quarterback in the next 20 years. So
we've won the war. You've won the battle. The Billie Jeans era has begun, which is very exciting for me. But
I still think it has to be mayonnaise coffee. Billie Jeans, I get it. Will Levis, Billie Jeans.
It's just much funnier, right? It's just a much
Levi's.
funnier
I get it. Well, and my phone, Luke and I text from time to time. We're sort of friendly. And when we text, we always talk football, and I'll bring up Will Levis, and my phone continues to autocorrect Will Levis to Will Levi's. I've stopped fixing it, so yeah, I guess maybe Billie Jeans it is.
A lot of people have been saying it's Mayo time has been the thing
people
are saying today, which I get it.
If he actually put mayonnaise in his coffee, it would stick.
Yeah, it was just a joke for those who are still not in the loop on that particular thing. He did it as a dare, but it's kind of lasting.
And he has done it again a couple of times because it's a
lifetime deal from Hellman's Mayo.
Hellman's, yeah. Good for him.
Lifetime endorsement. But yeah, we are not, despite the fact we just did, we're not going to talk about the Titans or the Steelers today. Dear listener, we are going to pile into one of our favorite topics, one of your favorite topics we know as well, the Downtrodden Franchise Index Midseason check-in. For those unfamiliar, the Downtrodden Franchise Index, or DFI for those in the know, is our list inventory catalog of the NFL franchises that just cannot catch a break, whether that's historical, whether that's recent. It is a non-scientific, non-mathematical way of denoting which are the most hopeless teams in the NFL. There are 10 teams in it for 2023, as we said on our preseason DFI preview, for those that didn't hear that. So we'll be going through those teams, where they stand, who's getting out, who's potentially coming in, what else is going on in the swamps of the NFL rather than in the heady heights. But before we get into all that, encourage you guys as always to hit us up on the socials at Half Yard Line Pod, wherever you use social media. If you are on YouTube watching this, hello.
Hi.
If you're not watching this on YouTube and you want to, hit us up on that Half Yard Line Pod.
Even if you don't want to, just go ahead and click on the YouTube.
Yeah. And then you can also email us halfyardlinepod@gmail.com. So with all that being said, Tim, the DFI rises again, sinks again. I don't know what the right verb is for that, but we revisit them after week 9. We're more than halfway through the season now because of the stupid extra game. We no longer have equal halves, which I'm finding annoying in terms of games played, but we're entering week 10.
Old man yells at clouds. Yeah,
Yes, we're entering week 10. What's your big picture takeaway on the Downtrodden Franchise Index as we delve on in?
Yeah, so first thing, I think it's probably worth reminding, dear listener, what the DFI total bucket looks like for the 2023 season. Yeah. And so the teams that are in the DFI, and if you don't know if your team is in the DFI, I mean, you're really behind the times here. We love talking about DFI teams. One of our favorite things to do is talk about, teams that have had a lot of lack of success, start to have success. That's always fun. It's always fun to talk about teams that have had no success and continue to have no success, and we certainly have a mixed bag of those this year. But just to hit the DFI, our sort of DFI stalwarts, if you will, teams that have been in the DFI forever, maybe in the DFI forever, Jets, Browns, and Lions. Now, to be fair, we don't rank them. There is no ranking of DFI teams.
Not power ranking.
Not a power ranking. They're all terrible. They're all downtrodden-y. They've all had unbelievably bad luck, much of which they've earned. But yeah, Browns, Lions, Jets, sort of a special ring in the DFI, though more to come on that. Cardinals, Indeed. Commanders, Colts, Texans, Panthers, Falcons, Jaguars. So those are your 10 teams: Jaguars, Falcons, Panthers, Browns, Jets, Texans, Colts, Commanders, Cardinals, and Lions. Now, for those of you who have been following along with the NFL season, You might say, Tim, that is certainly not the worst 10 teams in the NFL. And let me tell you, dear listener, are you correct? The worst 10 teams in the NFL would need to include my Pittsburgh Steelers, would need to include the New York Football Giants.
Oh, the Giants for sure. The Bears, the Broncos.
Yeah, the Bears, most certainly. The Broncos have to be on that list. We thought about putting the Broncos on this list.
We did.
Yeah, we didn't. The Patriots would have to be on that list. But that's not what the DFI is. And so just a quick, this is long-term downtrend, can't catch a break. Even when you're catching a break, you don't really catch a break. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the teams. Just reminding people of this DFI concept. These are teams that for the last 20, I mean, you think about the Lions and the Browns haven't won a playoff game in 20
decades.
years, 30 years. The Jets, had one little run there with Rex Ryan and company, but really other than have been just bad for, they still talk about Super Bowl III.
Yeah, and when you get those little things like the Browns winning a playoff game against your Steelers, right? It's like an island in the ocean of pain that has been visited upon the franchise going back to the 1960s or something. So
Steeler fans are still bitter about that game, but there is some part of you that kind of says, I mean,
you were due.
Right,
they were due.
They can have one. Like it's at some point you feel bad. I think the Steelers had beaten the Browns. And I would say including playoffs, except the Browns hadn't been there to beat them. Since Ben Roethlisberger arrived, something like 23-2. I mean, it was crazy
stupid.
Town.
Stupid stuff.
Yeah. So,
but yeah,
teams like that just can't really catch a break have had a season up every now and again, right? You think about the Panthers; they went to the Super Bowl. The Jaguars,
twice.
Have
AFC Championship game.
AFC Championship game recently. But then sort of fell. I mean, the Falcons were in the Super Bowl not all that long ago.
28-3.
But never any sort of lasting success. It doesn't stick, if that makes sense. Anything else before we dive into sort of the success of the teams on the field that you would sort of in your highlights of the DFI that we've missed?
No, I think you've hit it. I mean, the other major theme is that these are all teams where you see a lot of churn, right? Churn in the front office, churn in the coaching seat, if you want to call it that, churn at quarterback. If you don't have consistency,
had the Raiders in there.
Yeah, I mean they're on the watch list. But these are teams which have a lot of churn at those. Those are probably the three most important things to get right as an organization, right? Have a good have a good general manager or head of front office, whatever the title is. Have a good coach, have a good quarterback. If you have two of those three, you're probably going to be pretty good. If you manage to get all three, you're likely to be very good. These teams will be drafting high all the time. There's always a new savior. There's a new coach. There's a new GM. So you think about the Browns as the exemplar, as we always do. I mean, how many coaches have they been through? How many quarterbacks can you name? We did this a couple of weeks ago, and you were able to name a fair amount of Browns quarterbacks, but there have just been so many. So I'd say that's another thing that kind of, it's not the be-all, end-all, but there is commonality in that, right? Just never have anything lasting. A coach comes in, has a great year, he gets fired. A quarterback comes in, has a good year or two, flames out or gets injured or something. So churn is what I would say is also a big part of what constitutes DFI team. But as you said, we're now going to focus on what they have been like on the field this year. And Tim, the record for the Downtrodden Franchise Index thus far through 9 weeks is not so bad.
Not so bad. I mean, not great, but for a DFI group, yeah. So I've got 39-45.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you had?
That's what I had. Although I will say, if you take out the Jags and the Lions, it's 27-41, which does sound a little bit more like you're getting
there's the DFI
in the right direction. But you can't exclude them because hey, they're still part of it right now.
And
so they are propping things up right now.
If you exclude the Cardinals and the Panthers, who we almost didn't include this year, you'd be at 37-30. So
wow.
It slices both ways.
Almost 500 as a whole, which is pretty good. Although, as always, a lot of football left to play, so we'll see where we are come season's end.
Oh, absolutely. And DFI teams are known for nothing if not just absolutely bombing the end of the season, right?
We should say false hope, right? We're in it.
We're in it. We're in it.
We're 5-4. We might, and then we don't, and then we're terrible. So that also
That's
happens.
right. So let's talk about teams who may be biting on some of that false hope. If we just look at records, and records are not perfect, but we've got 3 teams in the DFI who have records above 500 right now. You've got the Lions, you've got the Jaguars, and you've got the Browns. So let's talk about those 3 for a minute. I want to add one more to this list because they were trending up. But let's start with the three with the winning record as sort of teams who, at least at this point in the season, we think maybe we should have let them off the DFI a year early. Are you buying the Lions, the Jags, and the Browns? Either all of them, none of them, some of them? What's your view on the sort of top DFI teams?
Yeah, so those three, I would say in order of my belief, whatever you want to call it, I would say Lions 1, Jags 2, Browns 3, and I would say Browns are a fairly distant 3.
Okay.
The Lions were trending up last year. Obviously, everyone knows they traded Goff for Stafford, and there was a kind of the rebuild. They brought in Dan Campbell. They won the last game of last season in Lambeau Field and ended Aaron Rodgers' tenure in Green Bay. It was all very dramatic and whatnot. This year, they've really improved defensively. And offensively, last year, they were already very strong, and they've continued to build on that. But the defense was pretty horrible for the first half of the year. And now, they're 5th in yards per game allowed. So I think they've got some sustainability because it's not a one-way street. Last year, it felt like they have to score 45 points.
Yep.
And this year, the defense has stepped up and improved them so much as a unit that there's much more paths for them to win games, right? It doesn't have to be Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown going huge every single week. Laporta's looked good. Gibbs has had, a flash here or there. Maybe he starts to improve the team. Brian Branch has been good on the defensive side of the ball. So I think from a kind of growth perspective, I think the Lions are good now and the best of this three-hander, whatever you want to call it. And I think they have room to build. The Jags benefit from playing in an awful division. Well, at least a fairly awful division.
Got less awful now.
Yeah, of which my Titans are a part. I think on them, I would say they are good, and they're probably going to win the division again. So they're on the inside track to getting off the DFI, I would suggest. Lawrence has been good. I wouldn't say he's been spectacular. The ascent to he's a top 5 quarterback hasn't really happened as of yet, so it remains to be seen if that jump occurs. They've got a pretty good roster. Peterson's an established coach. If Lawrence can continue his growth, they've added pieces around him. I think they're pretty well set up. So I would say both of those teams are fairly set up for positive onward some onward success, I would say. But I think the Lions are probably better set up than the Jags, just because I think they're a bit more well-rounded. Even though the Jags play in a worse division, I would say the Lions I'm more confident in than the Jags, and then the Browns are parked for a second, and we can talk about them separate. But I don't know if you agree with that kind of overall very broad take on both of those teams.
Well, I do, and I think it's because, one of the things we talk about DFI team is the longevity of it, right? It's this consistent bad. And so if you're going to come off, part of that has to, what do you think about the staying power of sort of that team's ability to come off? And that's where I'm going to bring one more team in to this part of the conversation, and that's the Houston Texans, who seem to be on the rise. They're not above 500 because they've played 8 games, so they're 400, or they're right at 500, 4-4.
4-4.
And so very respectable performance from a team that, if C.J. Stroud wasn't C.J. Stroud, could have gone anywhere. And I think to stick with the 3 we were talking about a minute ago, the Jaguars, to me, feel like they're kind of as good as they're going to get.
Interesting.
They've spent a fortune on talent, right, over the last several off seasons. They've traded for players. They've brought in free agents. They've tried to sort of make it run now. And if you compare that to the Lions, if you can compare that to even the Browns, frankly, but certainly to the Texans, they haven't gone on that sort of win now spending spree in those other organizations that I feel like the Jaguars really sort of have. Right, Trevor Lawrence is year 3, year 21, 22, 23?
Yep.
And so that contract's coming. And they have kind of given the rookie or the rookie contract, quarterback contract budget, and they've gone out and spent to try to bring those guys in ways that the Lions didn't have that benefit, right? So they didn't go out there and blow a bunch of money on position players.
A lot of cap tied up in Stafford still, even when they traded him. It was
he was a veteran,
full,
right? He had his
full
veteran
reset.
Salary. Yeah. And when you got a team like the Texans who just figured out they had a quarterback, they've got the opportunity to go out and spend some money. And so when I think about the Jaguars versus the Lions, to me, it's a team that's ascending versus a team that's trying to keep its head above water almost. And that sounds awful for a team that's 6-2, and I don't want to take anything away from the Jaguars necessarily. You can only play the teams you can play, and they're beating the teams that are put on the schedule in front of them. But their losses this year are to the Chiefs and the Texans. Their best win by far is the Bills, right? And aside from that, they beat the Colts in Anthony Richardson's first game. They beat the Falcons, who are not good, and certainly were not good when they were playing them. They've beaten the Colts again without Anthony Richardson. They beat the Saints, and they beat my Steelers, who, let's just set that aside. They're terrible. So they've not beat anybody of consequence except the Bills, and the Bills, as we all know, are one of those teams that just likes to lose games sometimes. So you're not sure that Jags are a 6-2 team overall. You said probably win the division. I think that's right, but it's only probably. Like, when you look at the AFC South, and we talk about them as being a terrible division, the AFC South has the Jags at 6-2, the Texans at 4-4, Colts at 4-5, Titans at 4-5 with a newfound quarterback. The Colts are on the way down. Richardson's out. They're not. They won last week, and God love them for it, but that's not a team on the ascendancy.
Yeah, it's a holding
the
pattern,
Titans,
right?
Yeah, the Titans might be. We'll see. Levis has looked good. They're 1-1 with him. We'll see if that continues.
Yeah, it's an evaluation season for the Titans. But yeah, you're right. The Jags probably is the word. It's not locked in.
Well, but I think their biggest contender has all of a sudden become the Texans. And C.J. Stroud is playing well enough that you look around and you start. I mean, it was hilarious to me watching them play this last week because you're watching the game and you're like, who are these people? And we'll talk about one of them very specifically in a second. But we're watching, the likes of Tank Dell and Noah Brown and Nico Collins all of a sudden, are getting big play catches in big play spots for a team that's winning games. And you always look at good quarterbacks and say, gosh, they make the guys around them better. And I am never one to jump on a quarterback bandwagon too early.
Nope.
He's played a couple of games, let's see. But man, does CJ Stroud look the part, and he's making the guys around him look like they could be football players. And so when I think about teams that could be on the way up, I think we got to bring the Texans into that conversation too, even though they didn't have the winning record, and so I didn't offer them to you as a piece there. But if I were to rank the three we gave you, I agree 100%. It's Lions, Jags, and the Browns are way on down the list, and we'll get to them in a second. But I would bring the Texans and put them not quite as good as the Lions. I think they're probably a year behind the Lions in the process, but on that same trajectory versus I've got the Jags headed down. What say you on the Texans?
Yeah, I would agree. CJ Stroud, when we did the draft previews and the kind of coverage we'd had on the pod around them, we both said CJ Stroud is the best quarterback in this group. So far, no sign that that's not the case. He's looked excellent, exceptional, whatever you want to pick.
All due
set the
respect to
rookie
Levis.
record. Yep, set the rookie record for passing yards in a game. Levis will obviously eclipse that soon enough, but we just haven't had enough starts. Yeah, you're right. D'Amico Ryans we praised as a hire. We said it was one of those. It actually made a lot of sense, which DFI teams don't usually do. They tend to just make hires where you kind of go, you think of like the Freddie Kitchenses of the world, where you think, are you really? Are we doing? Whereas this is like franchise stalwart, leader of men type, comes from a winning organization, has got a track record as a coordinator, etc., and so on. So yeah, I think the Texans definitely looking up, especially when you consider how bad they've been the last couple of years. 2 one-and-done coaches, front office in disarray, quarterback completely unknown, and very, very quickly they have become a bit of a cause célèbre in the NFL and are doing some damage. So definitely big props to them. And as you mentioned, some randos making plays, which are one of our favorite things. And on that note, the rando of the week, if you will, the Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week is a Texan. So brief DFI interlude here.
Please.
Won't surprise people who watch the game to hear this name. For those that aren't familiar with the Jonas Gray Player of the Week, it is someone who comes out of the clear blue sky to do something amazing, great performance, guy you've never heard of, comes from obscurity. Jonas Gray, of course, the ultimate example of that. Jonas Gray, we should say, as always, is not dead. The memorial part of this award is just a joke. FYI. And we support all Jonas Gray players to go on and have Hall of Fame careers and do brilliant things, unlike Jonas Gray himself, who faded straight back into obscurity after his 1 week of wonder. But this week, Tim, Dare Ogunbowale, running back / kicker, apparently, for the Houston Texans. There was only one choice. The first non-specialist, i.e. not kicker or punter, to make a field goal in a regular season game since 2004, which was Wes Welker.
I was going to say, was that Chad Ochocinco tried one, but I can't remember.
He did. Doug Flutie as well, the drop kick. Do you remember that?
Yeah, about to say,
that was a field.
Wes Welker may have done a drop kick too, didn't he?
It was, but this was a field goal, so he made a field goal. Snap, hold, kick. Kaimi Fairbairn, the Texans' usual kicker, goes down with a quad injury. The punter, for some reason, isn't the backup kicker, which I found quite strange, but Ogunbowale steps up, nails a 33-yard field goal.
Good looking field goal.
It went in halfway up the goalpost. It was a legitimate kick.
Had some rotation to it.
Had some spin. And it was a game they only won by 2 points. So
that was a huge kick.
Huge kick in the context of this game. Obviously, CJ Stroud gets the headlines and right.
Now, they did take a knee, I would note, on their last extra point that they didn't
They
need.
did. Well, it's
so
interesting because I think the field goal was shorter than an extra point would be, or around the similar.
No, it was a 33. So
was it 33?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Wait, hang on. Wait a minute. They backed up
because they didn't try the
extra
PAT.
points for what? The 15 now.
Yeah, they didn't try the PAT, but 32? They tried the field goal. So
in the same, they were not trying PATs. My understanding was, it wasn't worth the risk for 1 point.
Oh, the one at the end it was because they took a knee, because if it would been returned for a touchdown or something, then you would have blocked, you would have tied the game. But anyway, it wasn't because of Dare Ogunbowale's kicking prowess. Nope. Also took kickoffs, which was brilliant. So Dare Ogunbowale is a 5'11", 205-pound running back from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Hey.
He was actually a corner or DB in high school. Was all conference as a senior, had 38 tackles, 2 picks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries. 4 years on the honor roll, played basketball, ran track, and played soccer, which I think is the key note here. If you're wondering about, obviously, Ogunbowale, a memorable name, his sister, Arike, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, was a 3-time Wisconsin Basketball Player of the Year, went to Notre Dame and won the national championship.
Made a buzzer beater to win it, right?
She did, and I think she made the winning basket in the semi-final, or the Final Four, sorry, I should say, as well. She was the Female Athlete of the Year in the ACC in 2018. The men's was Lamar Jackson. Then she was the 5th overall pick in the WNBA draft. She's been the All-Star Game MVP, plays for the Dallas Wings, and is a 3-time All-Star. So, the family's got some game across the board in the sporting world. If you recognize the name and didn't know why, that was probably it. But Dare, not widely recruited, was a walk-on at Wisconsin as a corner, then switched to running back in his second year. Then he ran for 94 yards in his first game, and they gave him a scholarship not long after that. So a proper, try-hard, out-of-nowhere guy. He never really had a huge college explosive, career or anything. His best
never
was
had 1,000 yards rushing.
No, 819 yards, 7 touchdowns as a junior, but 36 catches in that year as well. So that's kind of a preview of what his NFL career would be. He was a team captain. He also interned at Merrill Lynch, I found out. So that was quite interesting. So in case this whole football thing,
so he really does like
out,
money.
He does. And he's also had a backup plan, which is probably a good thing. But he did go to the combine, Tim. Despite this, however, he was not drafted. 26 running backs drafted in 2017. He was not one. Although all of these players were, so maybe this helps explain it. Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, James Conner, Aaron Jones, Deontay Foreman, Samaje Perine, Jamal Williams, and Chris Carson. So quite a good draft for running backs. But yeah, 26.
You mean you couldn't stick out in that crowd? Jeez,
yeah,
what kind of loser
26 guys went. There were a lot of others, obviously. Dare Ogunbowale, not one of those guys. He's now on his 5th team. So he's been on the Texans practice squad. He's been on the Bucks practice squad, played for the Commanders, played for the Bucks, properly played for the Jags, and played for the Texans again. And has 5 total touchdowns in his career to date. Those of us who play in large fantasy football leagues know the name because as a PPR emergency bye-week option, he's come up a few times. He's had a couple of games doing that. But he only has 2 offensive touches all season for the Texans, so playing some special teams, doing what needs to be done. But, Tim, earning his Jonas Gray Memorial Teaspoon with the stunning, folklore ensuring 33-yard field goal in this game. Dario Gumbawale, we salute you and award you the Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week teaspoon for Week 9. Congratulations. Any final thoughts on Dario before we move back to DFI comings and goings?
No, I was just reading his career statistics, and 422 yards rushing for 4 touchdowns, 78 catches for 558 yards and 1 touchdown, but 1 for 1.
1 for 1,
kicking field
100%. I actually thought about this when we were talking about, because Tim and I exchanged some texts on, what's the Jonas Gray Player of the Week qualifications, and because it's
we did. Got heated.
I just picked them because it's fun, and we had a debate about what constitutes. But I would say it's about overcoming odds. It's about defying your expectations. I mean, like I say, walked on in college, didn't even play the position that he went on to play in the NFL. Was on 2 practice squads, didn't get drafted, and he's in year 7 in the NFL. So already, forgetting this game, the NFL, they stands for not for long, as they say. He's already defied many an expectation to get to this point, and I think kicking a field goal in a way that no one who saw it will forget certainly puts him in the Jonas Gray ranks. So kudos to Dario Gumbawale and his outstanding effort with the right leg. Certainly deserving Teaspoon Award winner this week.
Exactly. And so transitioning back to our DFI update for 2023 mid-season, let us chat about what we might call the middle of the DFI based on their performance this year. It's better than the bottom of the league, but frustratingly not enough for these teams. And this does tend to be, frankly, where a lot of these teams cap out. You're going to get into that 500-ish borderline playoff team type of a season, and you're not able to hold it together, or you misread the situation. I always think about the Jaguars. I think if the Jags had missed the AFC Championship game the year they went, was that 2020 or whatever that was?
No, it was 7-18 maybe. I think.
Whatever it was. I don't know. They beat the Steelers.
It was
COVID through everything that was before COVID might as well have been 2020. Nothing happened before 2020.
Yes.
But anyway, 2017, 2018, whatever it was. Had they not gone to the AFC Championship game that year, I think they would have been a better team subsequently, because the front office made decisions like they were close to winning a Super Bowl, and they weren't. They had gotten lucky. They had a little run through the playoffs there that, by all rights, they shouldn't have had, but they did. And so you can get ahead of yourself. And I think sometimes DFI front offices do that. You get, all right, we're 500, we're ready to make a run for it, and you bring in a star wide receiver. Well, that we shore up the offensive line first, so we can be a 10-7 team, and then maybe go get those pieces we think we need. I might have argued the Jets had done it this year if the Rodgers thing had panned out, right? You get into this, we look really good except for and then you go and you waste too many resources or too much money, or you get the best guy available who may not be good enough, right? And you kind of make silly decisions, and you get stuck in that 4-5, 5-4, or 4
in the 500, the Jeff Fisher zone.
Or Mike Tomlin might get this thing named after him if he's not careful before too long. But never losing. Commanders, Colts, Jets, Falcons, all in the kind of 4-5. The Jets are 4-4 because they've only had to play 8 games. We would have put the Texans in this bucket, but we kind of pushed them with the ascending. You could bring the Browns sort of down into this conversation. So this is kind of the meat of the DFI. Commanders, Colts, Jets, Browns, Falcons. Talk about that group. How do you see that group? How do you get out of that group, if you will? Like, what do these teams need to do? How are you kind of thinking about those guys?
Well, it's interesting because I think the 2 teams on that list that you could argue are the kind of best 2 this year, probably would be considered the best 2, are the Jets and the Browns, who are so similar, it's scary, right? You've got both of them paying a huge amount of money to a quarterback. Neither of those quarterbacks is looking to be the answer. One, because Deshaun Watson's playing terribly. The other is because Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old and he's got a torn Achilles. So it's fair to wonder if in 2 years, either of those guys will be starting. And I would say odds on probably neither will be. Both of them have fairly anemic offenses. Both of them have excellent defenses, great pass rush, ability to turn the ball over. They can win games. They can hang around in games. But I think they are going to be on a short path back down the hill again fairly soon. The Jets, because when Aaron Rodgers, if he comes back at all, which is no guarantee, but let's say he comes back and plays next year, it's realistic to assume next year will be it. He'll be 41, 42 years old, coming off a torn Achilles. His contract's only 2 years long. He's kind of a bit of an eccentric, to say the least, so you can see him retiring after that's done and go and do something else. Deshaun Watson's been terrible and doesn't look like getting any better. So I'm not really sure where you go from there. And the Browns are in salary cap hell for as long as he's on the roster because they paid him a guaranteed contract like a bunch of damned idiots. So I think those two teams are pretty similar.
Sorry, what was that technical term?
Damned idiots.
Got it.
So I think both these teams are going nowhere this year. They're both going to be in the 500-ish range. One or both might squeak into a playoff spot. They will get beaten straight away because the offenses just aren't very good. I mean, the Jets are the best use case I've ever seen for how important having a quarterback is who's even halfway decent. Like, if they traded for Josh Dobbs or something, like, maybe you could say you can hang in there, Rodgers comes back, but, like, Zach Wilson's just not good at playing quarterback. It gives me no joy to say it. He's just not. And I saw a stat that I wanted to give you, Tim, and see how you react to this, because I think this sums up where the Jets are and have been and why they're so DFI-ish and why they're sticky in the DFI stakes.
All right.
In the last 5 seasons, only 4 teams have scored 8 or fewer offensive touchdowns through their first 8 games. Okay?
Okay.
So this is 5 seasons worth of data, and there's only been 4 occasions where a team has scored 8 or fewer offensive touchdowns through 8 games.
2 of them are
2019, Jets. 2020, Jets.
Oh,
2023, Jets.
Oh,
2023, Giants. So only 4
them.
teams have done it in 5 years. 3 of them are the Jets.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, this is just, it's almost boring. Like, they're the same team as last year. The defense actually got better, but the offense is as bad or worse as it was last year. I bet they wish they still had Mike White, honestly, at this stage, to just throw somebody in there. But yeah, the Jets are not very good. The Panthers, the Browns have maybe a path you could think to getting good, but the path is Deshaun Watson plays a lot better. That's it. Like, they can't get much better than they are right now. They've lost both starting tackles to season-ending injuries. They've lost their best offensive player, Nick Chubb, to a season-ending injury. The QB of the future does not look to be on this roster. They have won 5 games. 2 of those were against DFI teams, Colts and Cardinals. The Colts game, their highest offensive output of the season with PJ Walker. So what do you take from that? I don't think this is a team that can last the distance this year. And I don't think the Jets will either. One of these teams will win 8 or 9 games and make a playoff spot. Maybe one of them wins 10s and gets through, but it's a bit fool's gold to me. But those are the kind of the 2 best of this group. But they're also the 2 I have the least confidence in going forward beyond sort of the end of this year or the end of next year. I don't know if you disagree with that.
No, I think that's right. The Commanders are an interesting one because it depends on what Sam Howell is or who the next guy is. I feel like the bones were there for that team. I picked them to kind of get going a little bit. But
4-5, so not bad.
Yeah, this is a team that at the end of the day is in so much transition right now. Front office, ownership, who knows, what they're going to look like. You think back to the Colts circa 2012 or 10 when the Haslams bought the team, and you thought, okay, this is either going to turn them around or it's not. Oh yeah, whatever I said, I meant the Browns. Yeah. Haslam's bought the team, and you thought, okay, maybe this is the Haslam's legacy, minority owners in the Steelers, franchise that's notoriously stable. Maybe this was going to come in and flip them around, and I think there's a question about whether or not, Josh Harris can be that for the Commanders. But we don't know yet, and to me, they're kind of floating in that pool of unknown. The Colts, to me, 4-5, clearly on the way up when Richardson's playing, but the rest of their season to me is sort of fodder. Like, it doesn't matter if they go 9-8 this year, or 8-9, or 6-11. Like, it doesn't matter until Richardson comes back, and so I kind of have them over in this bucket. The Falcons are the one team you really didn't talk much about.
Yes.
They're, clearly quarterback is a problem.
Are they the most hated team in the league right now? The Falcons? I feel like everyone...
It can't be. No one cares about them enough. Their coach is among the most hated coaches.
Yes,
certainly.
Yes, and the ongoing sort of incredible leaps of logic that he is going through at the press conference podium to justify not using a tight end who had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie and a running back you took 7th overall. It's just becoming like a pantomime. Like, are you not using your best players purely to piss people off? Like, it almost seems like it's got to that point. And you're right, the quarterback situation, Ritter was not it, and I don't think most people thought he was ever going to become it. But benching him for a journeyman like Taylor Heineke.
Yeah, what are you doing with Taylor Heineke? And I love Taylor Heineke.
By the way,
Bud Light.
Yeah, but what is the point? Like, that was my question about that decision.
Not learning anything about your team. You're not going to win this year. What are you after?
No, right. The Falcons aren't going anywhere. And to be honest, I think the Falcons, as opposed to maybe like the Jets, who I said, don't have much confidence going forward. Like, the Jets have a good coach, right? Like, Robert Saleh is a good football coach. Stefanski is a good football coach. I think he's won Coach of the Year. He's had some downtime. He's kind of brought the team back. He can put a staff around him. He's shown some capability. Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator hire that makes a bit of a splash, and he gets a move somewhere else. It happens all the time, and it doesn't always pan out. I think he's pissing the fan base off so much as well.
Never pans out.
Yeah, but he's pissing the fan base off so much too. Like, you kind of give yourself nowhere to hide because you haven't even got like that going for you. Like, all the Falcons fans I see on Twitter or on, talking about it on Sports Talk or whatever are just livid with his demeanor, with what he's coming out with, his kind of condescending tone, like he's super smart. So that doesn't help anyone. And I mean, the funny thing about that is, in terms of where they're at, record's not bad, right? They're in a bad division, which is winnable because no team in that division is any good. But it's really because of the defense that they're in. I mean, the defense is the 6th best in the NFL. So they are sticking in games because of the defense. It's not to do with the offense, which is what he's supposed to be good at. So that also plays a part. I feel like with the Falcons, this offseason, there'll be some kind of reset. It will be quarterback reset for sure, you would think. It may also be coach reset. So I kind of feel like going into 2024, this is going to be a very different proposition for the Falcons.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I remember when they drafted Bijan going, how does...
We said it. There's no... Why are you doing
running back help? And because, I mean, they were doing fine at running back. And not, I mean, maybe Bijan is the best thing that's in sliced bread, but to bring him in, use the pick on him, and then not do anything. I mean...
Yeah. I think
I don't know.
It just doesn't really make any like logical sense. And the thing is, you've already got Kyle Pitts, who's really good and never gets the ball. You have him doing stuff like blocking on jet sweep for Jonnu Smith. Now, I love Jonnu Smith, played for my Titans, made some great plays. Kyle Pitts is an elite talent, and you're just showing no interest in even trying to use him. Drake London has had flashes, been injured a bit, but I just feel like the Falcons they're kind of treading water, but in the way where they start sinking. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're probably a 500 team. And I feel like most Falcons fans, at least the overall sense that I get, whether this is right or wrong, Falcons fans, hit us up at Half Yard Line Pod if you disagree, is they kind of want this mini era to be over soon and start again with a different coach and at least try and like build something they can kind of believe in. Because I think this is kind of, we're winning games, but it's by hook and by crook and by luck and by whatever, rather than like a consistent thing that we can build upon. Certainly how I watch when I've seen them play, including against the Titans, I'm like, I don't really know what this is. Like, I don't really know what you are. I know what you want to be, I think, but you're not really doing it. So I don't really get the journey ahead for them at all. They're a little bit of a kind of, I think if they won 2 games, you wouldn't be very surprised.
No, I think that's right. And, it's an interesting world out there. I mean, we've talked a lot of teams. We talked about the Jets. We talked about the Browns. We just said it to a lesser extent about the Falcons. I think if you think about the entire DFI, you could say it. You could say it about my Steelers. You could say it about a lot of teams. This idea that you have a defense that keeps you in the game, but you don't have an offense that can run away from anybody, and so you're in every game.
Yeah.
Even
right.
The ones you're playing well, you're still just in the game because you can't run away from anybody.
Yeah, I mean, the Commanders were like that, right? You could have said before, because it was all about the pass rush and the defense is so good, but the defense is now backslid and now they're having to throw it a lot.
Yeah.
They weren't a team you would associate with razzle dazzle. Obviously, they brought Bieniemy in. Sam Howell's second in the NFL in passing yards this year. So it's kind of that team's done almost a little bit of a script flipping, but they were certainly in that bucket too, where it's like the defense keeps us in, and then whoever the hell is playing quarterback for us makes a couple plays.
Right. And so it's interesting to me because that's always been the Steelers' philosophy, right? If we're good on defense, we can figure it out. And so there seemed to be a lot
almost the Patriot
of teams,
way, right, to an extent too.
Yeah, borrowing that same philosophy recently. I want to take it one more quick aside from the DFI before we come back and talk about the basement dwellers. And that is to talk about, if I were to list to you the best teams in the NFL over the last 30 years, it wouldn't necessarily be the top 10 offenses. A lot of times your top 10 offenses, certainly generally very good on offense, but you can get some garbage time yards in there. You get some bad teams in there. You get some fluff in there. I'm just going to read to you the top 10 offenses real quick. There are a couple of DFI teams in here, so we'll say it's related. But I just think if we follow that sort of good enough on defense, but skimming along on offense, becoming a DFI trait almost.
Yeah.
Top 10 offenses: Miami, Detroit, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City, Minnesota, and Houston. I'm sorry, and then Dallas. Sorry. So I'm not sure that's not the top 10 teams in the NFL. Does defense just not matter anymore?
Yeah. It's interesting, like the way that the league has changed in kind of our football watching lives is very significant. Yeah. Right? You think about the early 2000s, it was defenses, running backs. I mean, that was what the 90s was like too. You think about the star players of the early 2000s. This is before Tom Brady was Tom Brady. You have Peyton Manning and you have Brett Favre, right? With I'm talking early 2000s, pre Phillip Rivers and Roethlisberger and Drew Brees and everyone else. And it was Sean Alexander, LaDainian Tomlinson, Priest Holmes, Clinton Portis, all these guys. And then 2000 you associate with the NFL. And the defenses won. You had the 2002 Bucks, which was a defensive team. You had the 2000 Ravens, which is one of the best defensive teams we've ever seen. And you had the Patriots, who had a young Tom Brady game managing through. Defense wins championships. That was what, Belichick was a defensive coach. And really the Legion of Boom Seahawks were the last team that I felt like won because of the defense. I should maybe correct that and say the Broncos with Peyton Manning's last year, because he was not very good. But
yeah, but he was better than bad.
Yeah, and I think certainly increasingly now it's more become you just need enough. You don't need to be like dominant. But if you think about when the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs' offense was amazing. I know the Buccaneers had a lot of offense that year too, but the Chiefs' defense wasn't very good. The years the Chiefs have won, and this year the Chiefs' defense is playing really well, which is scary for everyone else.
Yep.
They've had enough. It doesn't have to be, hold you to 200 yards a game. It's got to be timely. It's got to create turnovers, and that is enough. So it's not you have to be defensive forward, but you have to have enough. But the priority is now more, I need to score points, because almost everyone can score points. And it tightens up most of the time in the playoffs. Not as much as it used to. But you still need to have a solid enough defense. You can't to be bottom 5 in every defensive category is not going to do the job. But you also need to be top 5 in every one. So I just feel like it's the priority has shifted away from that being the kind of cornerstone of the team. And I can tell you as a Titans fan, the last few years, we've done the same thing. It's defense, it's running game, it's old-fashioned football. That's what Vrabel's always wanted to play. And we had success in it. Timely offense and solid defense. But I feel like the roles have been reversed. Now it's about having a good offense and a timely defense is how you how you become like a good team in the NFL today.
The weighty downs, as Mike Tomlin would say. I just want to give one quick update on ridiculous defensive statistics. The Browns are now holding teams to an average of 145 yards passing per game in 2023.
Well, yeah. I tell you what will help with that, Tim, as we transition onto the basement dwellers of the DFI. Playing Clayton 2.
Sorry, the lack of Kyler Murray.
Yeah, the lack of Kyler Murray. The basement dwellers in the DFI, by which we mean, if you haven't worked it out by now, the 2 one-win teams in this group, which is the Cardinals and the Panthers. The Cardinals, I mean, one of the most incredibly inept, toothless, whatever you want to call it, offensive displays you will ever see in the history of the NFL. Like, in the history of the NFL. They gained 58 yards on 48 plays.
That's got to be.
Sorry,
I'm pulling up StatHead while we're talking here. That's got to be a record.
Do you want to know what their yards per? They had more yards per rush than yards per pass in the game.
Of course.
Do you want to know what their yards per pass was?
I mean, at one point I saw they had 50 yards passing and 15 yards in sacks. So they must have ended the game with less than 40 yards in total passing. They probably threw it 40 times. One to one?
0.6 yards per pass. I mean, that's actually very hard. That's very hard to do. I know that we talked about the Browns having a great defense, and they do. Cardinals, with Josh Dobbs, looking feisty. They're tanking the right way, if you want to say it that way, right? You stay in a lot of games. You create some buzz around the team. You lose all the time, which is what you actually want. And I'm sure if you asked Monty Ossenfort about it, he'd say, yeah, I'm happy to suck because the team's terrible. But you stay in games and you're at least respectable. Obviously, Kyler Murray's coming back this week is the word on the street, so that changes the calculus a little bit. But there's just such a talent vacuum on the roster. They are a long way from anything. I mean, they're a long way from 500. They're a long way from, respectability, in my estimation. Now, if Kyler Murray comes back and is the all-star high school and college quarterback that he once was, and a rising tide lifts all boats, then okay. But if he's not, you're going to be picking, at the moment they're picking first, and they're sitting on a ridiculously large quarterback contract. So it's an interesting dichotomy for the Cardinals in terms of what they do at the most important position. Not sure what you make of their current state, but a tough time out there in the desert if you're a Cards fan, because it's very difficult to see how you get out of where you are right now anytime this year, next year, and you're probably thinking 2025 is the first time you might be somewhat halfway towards decent.
No, and I think that's the problem, right? Any team can absorb being terrible right now for whatever reason. It's when you go, how do we get better from here? And you don't have an answer that I think is very, very difficult. I don't think there's anything else to say about Arizona, and so I'm going to borrow the time to say something about something else. So this was not even the most negative or the least positive passing yards per attempt this season. Can you believe there was a team that had less passing yards per attempt this season than the Arizona's 0.06 or 0.6?
No.
I want you to rack your brain and guess who else this season might have had the worst.
In an entire game? Like a team?
In an entire game. In an overtime game.
Oh. I feel like I should know this straight away, but I don't. So you're going to have to tell me.
The New York Giants playing the New York Jets.
I was going to say the Giants. I was going to say
negative points.
No, this was Tommy DeVito, right? Do you know what? I actually thought of this. Do you know, I should say I thought of this because I remembered that, but I thought there's no way overall, because I thought for the whole game, like, okay, you get some yards earlier, but that was what I thought. I should have said it. I knew it.
Yeah, you should have said it.
Damn you, Tommy DeVito.
Negative 0.6 when adjusted for sacks and everything.
Ugly.
Oh, that is the worst ever, by the way, was Washington in 1955, negative 3.6 yards per attempt. Minus 4 yards per attempt on 9 attempts. They completed one pass for negative 32 yards.
Wow.
Well, that would include the sack. Yeah, there was 29 sack yards. So one pass for negative 3 yards and then 29 sack yards. That was the total. The worst, other than the Giants, who also had a negative game in 2022 when they lost 3-29 to the Chicago Bears, were your Tennessee Titans in 2009. Put up a big old negative 0.5 burger in the 0-59 loss to the New England Patriots, which we talk about regularly on this program.
The Blizzard game, yeah, I remember watching it with no great joy. That's not, to be honest, I can't even remember our offense possessing the ball in that game, if I'm completely honest with you. But yeah, no, terrible passing performance from the Cardinals, terrible overall season performance from them. The other final DFI team.
Yeah, on the other side of the basement, right, are the Panthers, who have to absolutely be kicking themselves.
Well, maybe too early to kick yourself, but certainly warming up the old boot, because
you're kicking yourself at this point, because even if your guy turns out to be a guy, he's so obviously not the guy that is down in Houston at this point. He didn't turn your franchise around day one. He didn't come in and make you think, my God, we could be good. We don't have any good players, and we might be good. Can you imagine if we had good players? And I should also say, Houston offensive line, head and shoulders better than the Panthers offensive line. So maybe one day, they'll be more comparable. But you had the first overall pick. You gave up a fortune to go get it, and you used it on a quarterback. You had the pick of the litter. Could have had anybody you wanted. You took your guy who, I don't know, a little old couple of podcasters in the tri-state area said, not sure he's the better guy. Alabama, until very recently, not exactly churning out all-star QBs. I think I have to stop saying that now. There's about 4 of them in the NFL that are pretty good.
Yeah. But weirdly, the guys that put up the best stats either, which I kind of find interesting, like Mac Jones put up really, really incredible stats for Bama. And so did the guy you're talking about, Bryce Young. Tua put up very good statistics, don't get me wrong. And Jalen Hurts was ousted from Alabama by Tua. So right. you would actually say it's almost the reverse order. If you're ranking those QBs 1 through 4, you'd say Jalen Hurts is the best, then Tua, then Mac Jones, then Bryce Young right now, which is almost the reverse order of their collegiate
their success while they were at the school. No, 100%.
Which is quite funny.
And I think that's part of it, though. I think a guy like Bryce Young, I just don't know. He knows he's on a bad team. You got to do what you got to do. But if I'm in the front office in Charlotte, I'm looking down at Houston and going, how did we miss that one?
Well, I think this is something I spoke about with my brother. Shout out to my brother. When I was over in the UK, we were talking about the situation with Bryce Young. And we said it at the time we did the podcast too, but you are drafting someone to be the only person to be built the way he is built to be a success. Like, if Bryce Young is a success in the NFL, he will be the only one ever who has played quarterback at his size who has been good. Now, there haven't been many guys playing the position at his size, period, or full stop.
Nobody gets to
as
try,
I would say.
Right.
But you're right. When you look at it in the cold light of day, like you say to someone, I know he put up great college stats and all the rest of it, so don't take this the wrong way. But you are basically saying you have to be one of one. Like, there is no example. There is no other example in the history of the National Football League of this working. And to mortgage what you mortgaged to go up and get him, certainly at this point through 9 weeks, looks like the wrong decision. Now, who's to say CJ Stroud doesn't fall apart or Bryce Young works everything out and looks great? But it's a huge gamble to do something so significant with your franchise for a guy who you are banking on being the only guy who has ever done this. That's such a scary proposition for your Panthers fan. Now, you're right. Offensive line has not been very good. Skill position players are not particularly good either. Running game, kind of nowheresville. Defense has been strange. I mean, they've allowed the 8th fewest yards in the NFL, but they've allowed the joint most points per game, which is a weird combination of statistics that I saw. Bryce Young threw a terrible pick 6 on Sunday. He's got 8 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He's only got one game with more than one touchdown pass, which was against the Lions, but he also threw 2 picks in that game. There's been moments, there's been throws. The entirety of the Panthers' path forward relies on the right arm of Bryce Young and his health, and him missing a couple of games already does not fill you with confidence either. So they're a team who, if it doesn't pan out, you're going to be getting to 2025 draft time going, right, now what? Because 2024, they don't have a first-round pick. 2025, they don't have a second-round pick either, but at least maybe you think you've got someone in the first round to play with. But I don't really have a great sense for the Panthers going forward. Certainly the omens are not particularly good.
I'd really like to
and I wonder if they have the right coach.
I'd really like to have their first-round pick this year, I'll tell you that.
I also wonder if they have the right coach, because Frank Reich was a bit of a surprise hire. I've never really been a huge fan of him as an HC, to be completely honest, not just because he coached the Colts.
He got one of those crazy deals, though, right? Oh, no,
yeah.
Rule had the crazy deal.
Yeah, Matt Rule had the ridiculous one.
Reich had a less crazy deal afterward. Right?
Yeah, so I just felt with the Panthers, like, the path forward it's similar to, not similar in a lot of other ways, but like we said with the Browns, it's like, the Cardinals, it's like the only way for you to be good, really, in the short term is for the guy you already have to play a lot better than he has done. So, certainly some worrying times in Charlotte, as you say, but a team that I don't have a great sense of them doing much this year or next.
You know what the number one risk flashing red light that should have been shining when Bryce Young was coming out of college? You know what he was listed at on the profile his Alabama sent the NFL?
No.
He was listed at 204 pounds, which means 195.
Yeah, he was never... No.
And do you know what his height was listed at?
Was it like 5'10" or something?
So much better than that. It's 5'10" and an eighth.
Nice.
Like, that is the most... Like, okay, what? All right, not
Give me
6
the eighth.
foot. If you're going to lie, say 6 foot. If you're going to be honest, say 5'10". Like 5'10", but I'm over 5'10".
That's like
5'10" and an eighth.
It's like when a 10-year-old measures himself. I'm 4 for 8 3/4 or something.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's that kind of vibe. No, I agree.
Except
with
it's
you
not
on
even
that.
3/4. It's 1/8.
So Tim, we've gone top to bottom through the Downtrodden Franchise Index. Maybe a last couple of minutes here we just touch on maybe teams getting out, teams going in.
Yeah, I
feel
want
like
to take
teams
the ones
getting
going out because it's really easy.
You want to take that one?
I do, and then I'll let you worry about the teams going in. So the Jaguars, I think if they're back in the playoffs this year, as much as we may not love them,
They're out.
Yep. I think the Lions, barring a collapse, we wanted to let them out last year.
Ooh, I don't know.
I know it was a single season last year. We were really proud of them. We loved the way they played in Week 18, throwing Green Bay out of the playoffs even after they had no shot at getting in when the NFL absolutely botched the scheduling and ruined an opportunity to have what could have been an absolutely classic game going on at the same time. However, I think if the Lions, barring an absolute collapse, finish this season something like 14-3, 12
right.
12-5, somewhere in that bucket, you have to be.
I think they need to win a playoff game. Is my thought on the Lions. They haven't won a playoff game since the early. They haven't won a playoff game since the early 90s. The early 90s.
They go 14-3. They go 14-3 and win their division and lose in the first round back in the DFI next year.
Oh, they're back. They're back. Because they're a unique example. We said at the top. You said Browns, Lions, Jets. It's such an elite fraternity. Like the pain has gone for such a long time.
It has
such a long time.
It's the 90s, right? They haven't won a playoff
early
game
90s.
since the 90s.
Haven't won a playoff game since the 93, I think it was. So you have to win one. You can't win 14 games and get bounced.
I'm calling it then. They're going to win one because they're on the way out.
I think they are as well.
I think the Texans, it's going to be really interesting to see. I think that if the Texans finish the season above 500 and make the playoffs, we are probably pulling the Texans out just because they are coming from such a negative. The way the Deshaun Watson era ended, the way Bill O'Brien destroyed that team before the Deshaun Watson era ended, trading away everybody for anybody. And so the team had no talent. It had no draft picks.
Dysfunctional front office.
And they finally get the Deshaun Watson stink off of them for what's a ridiculous package of compensation from Cleveland. Turn it into what looks like to be a functioning franchise. Hopefully they can get some free agents there to upgrade some of those skill position players. So we're not talking about Daria Ngubwale and Tank Dell and Nico Collins as their key contributors next year. But I think I'd say 50-50 or better on the Texans. Everybody else, I got staying in.
Okay. The only other team I had as a maybe was the Commanders. Just depending on how the season goes. I don't think they'll get out this year, but I think that, it's possible maybe, but we'll have to wait and see on them. As far as teams going in, there are quite a lot. Quite a lot.
We're going to have to come up with a max length.
No, I'll do two that I don't think it's possible to put in at this point, but I think, are certainly on the downslope, and that's teams that have won, Super Bowls in recent memory. It's both the Tom Brady teams. New England looked
Patriots and Bucks,
horrendous, but they actually made the playoffs in 2021. People don't really remember that. They got thumped by Buffalo instantly. And frankly, the level of success they've had, no. You're not downtrodden just because you didn't win a Super Bowl for 5 years. So they're not going to be in yet. But I think they're on a dangerous...
They're a bad team, but they're not a downtrodden team yet. Yeah.
They're a bad team, and it doesn't look like they're getting much better. So maybe. Tampa, you won the Super Bowl too recently. They're on a skid right now. I had them circled preseason as a team that might be a DFI team post-Brady, but I don't think they're there yet, so I'll just park
I don't think
those
they're bad enough. Yeah.
No. The teams that I think are very much at risk, we already mentioned one, which was the Raiders.
Oh, yeah.
The two words that spring to mind are dumpster and fire. You can guess which order. quarterback purgatory, no idea what they're doing. We didn't put them in before the season because they made the postseason before McDaniels got there. They then brought McDaniels in. That was a complete shit show, I think, is the word of the moment. He's now been fired. The GM's been fired. There's no quarterback in place. They're kind of all over the shop in terms of offense and defense. I don't really know what you're building around on that team. Max Crosby, you've got. Adams is getting older. Jacobs is probably not going to come back to the team next year. Like, where are you confident about the Raiders? I have no idea. I feel like they're a team that's on the look. The other one is the Broncos, who
I tried to put in this year.
You tried to put in this year, but I said not yet. I mean, they're headed for, in my opinion, an ugly divorce between coach and quarterback, which is a surefire way to accelerate your entry to DFI. Did finally beat the Chiefs after 8 years, so that was good. I think they're another one that's on the list because I think that Russell Wilson-Sean Payton marriage is going to explode sooner rather than later. The other ones are Chicago and the Giants.
Overrated quarterback in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, the other two are the Chicago and the Giants. Now, Chicago, the rest of the season is just about, can we please get Justin Fields back and make sure we know that we don't want him? Because Tyson Bagent, you had a great week. You won the Jonas Gray Memorial Teaspoon.
And now he's going the way of Jonas Gray, my friends.
That was the pumpkin, pumpkin tent, the whatever is the carriage back into a pumpkin. So I had them on the list. They're picking two. They're going to have 2 of the top 3 picks at the moment next year. So even if they stink and they fire the coach, which I think is going to happen, and they may even fire Ryan Poles, I'm not sure if they will yet. You got DJ Moore. You brought in some good free agent pieces on defense. I like a couple of the players that they've got. You're going to have 2 exceptionally good picks to build off. Maybe that's quarterback and something else. Maybe you trade back, whatever. They've got a path. All about this season if Fields is good. And the last team is the Giants, who are just awful and are going to be awful. Daniel Jones done for the year. That contract is already looming badly over the franchise.
MVP Danny Dimes.
All I would say on the Giants, can you put someone in if they won a playoff game last year? I don't know if you've had long enough, is my only question on them. But
well,
I
the
feel
question
is, they're on the highway.
Can you
if they're
look
not
back beyond the playoff game to see how bad they were before that?
Yes, which was 10 years before, right? It was 10 years since they won a playoff game, I think, because no New York team had won a playoff game since they won the Super Bowl, I think, right? Is that no? The Giants had won a playoff game since they won the Super Bowl until last year.
Yeah, because that's the thing for me with Vegas too. Is it's they did go to the playoffs, but they had been bad, and got good for a hot minute, and then went to being bad again, and that's why I think them and the Giants both, they were bad, got good for a hot minute, and then went back to being bad again, and you think about it, often comes with a coach, right? The Giants bring in a new coach, and all of a sudden, all right, now we figured it out. Danny Dimes is figuring it out. We're throwing it to wide receivers never heard of before, but it doesn't matter because the scheme and the quarterback understand each other. He's running more. They've got it figured. And all of a sudden now he can't survive 2 consecutive games. The offensive line is terrible. They're all terrible. Yep. And you're like, maybe it wasn't the coach that fixed everything after all. And so if you go back to being terrible, can you get back on the DFI real quick? And I think the answer is yes. And just the sheer volume of terribleness too.
Yeah, they've
like
just
the
been
Patriots
so
aren't
bad.
going. The Patriots aren't going, but if they have any more of these record-setting feudal weeks, or have several of them in a row, and like Belichick doesn't survive the end of the season, like if you shit can Bill Belichick in week 12 and bring back Josh McDaniels or something.
Oof.
Like maybe we make an exception, like how the mighty have fallen. Like eventually you fall far enough.
Expectation versus reality, right? Like the Giants were a buzzy team coming in.
Oh yeah, some people thought maybe Super Bowl even contenders.
Yeah, and have not just been bad; they've been the worst team in the NFL. That is steep. And same Belichick. You expect Belichick teams to be good. If Belichick teams are terrible, and if you fire Bill Belichick mid-season, yeah, we'll have to have a conversation. For sure.
All right. That's going to do it for us on the DFI update. I do have one quick hitter for you.
Sure.
I am going to give you a statistic, and I'm going to give you players 5 through 2. There we go. 2 through 5 at that statistic. and I want you to give me who number one at that statistic is. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I botched all of that, but I think you got it.
I got
this
the
is
idea.
interception percentage. Okay.
Okay.
So fewest interceptions per pass attempt, if you will. Baker Mayfield with 1.4 of his passes being intercepted, 1.4%. Derek Carr, 1.3%. Joe Burrow, 1.3%. Lamar Jackson, 1.2%. Who is number one, and what is the percentage?
CJ Stroud.
It is.
And
any idea what the percentage is?
Well, he's got one interception, I think. So I'm going to say it is 0.5.
0.4. But yeah, how about that for a rookie to come out there, throw the ball 279 times in his first 8 games, and come up with a whopping 1 interception to 14 touchdowns, in case people thought he was good for a rookie.
Tied with Will Levis as the rookie quarterbacks with the fewest interceptions thrown, right, Tim? I think that's how you wanted to phrase that.
Yeah, how many passes has Will Levis?
It's not important.
Not as many. But, I mean, just CJ Stroud has been absolutely blown. I've got enough CJ Stroud stats to keep us here all night, but we're not going to do that. We are going to bid you, fair listener, adieu. Thank you for checking out the Half Yard Line on YouTube, on your podcast app of choice. Hit us up with a like, subscribe, rating, review. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. We'll try to tailor to you. Hit us up on the socials. We'd love to talk to you in that way. Gmail, halfyardline@gmail.com, halfyardlinepod@gmail.com, halfyardlinepod on the socials, all the ones that matter anyway. But until next time, we ask you to be good.
Peace out.
Bye.